Good morning, everyone. I'm Alison Fairbrass. I'm a research fellow at University College London, and I'm part of the diverse marine values team. We've already heard about cultural values, that marine and coastal environments provide many benefits to humans, which we value. Some of those are very obvious. We quantify them quite regularly and often value them and trade because commodities are traded in markets. Others are less regularly quantified, like the cultural services that David talked about, and are less regularly turned into numbers and even less regularly turned into economic figures. Those values that are regularly quantified and turned into economic values tend to be those that dominate decision-making because there's data available. Part of the work that I've been leading has been looking at how well values are currently represented and what evidence is used in decision-making in the UK context in terms of what values are represented and considered in decision-making. We, in our project, are looking at how to try and round out the suite of values that are considered in decision-making, producing different kinds of evidence that might be possible to use in UK decision-making. I'm going to today talk about some initial findings from interviews that I've been conducting with UK decision makers in the marine environment about the obstacles that they face in terms of considering a diversity of people's values for the marine environment in UK decision making. I'm going to present some entry points to missing values in decision making that have both been highlighted by the decision makers I've been speaking to and also from the reflections within our team. And I'm going to talk about some of the myths that we feel need to be debunked within the marine decision-making community about how to produce and use evidence about a diversity of values that people hold for the marine and coastal environment. So firstly, these are 4 of the barriers that have been quite common across the decision makers that I've been interviewing. So firstly, the lengthy and technical consultation documents that are provided for public consultations. These can act as a time and expertise barrier to a diversity of people engaging in consultations about marine and coastal environments in the UK. Another common barrier is a lack of legal requirement for the consideration of a diversity of values in decision making, particularly on cultural and social values for the marine and coastal environment, and an absence of a representative consultee similar to those consultees that represent the environment in the UK. So a consultee that specifically would represent people's values. These are really the myths that I think are commonly coming from, that I hear from the decision makers I'm speaking to, is about the perceived high cost and time requirements of producing evidence about people's values for the marine environment. That also techniques that are used do not survey a representative sample of the population, and they're often biased by those people who have the loudest voices. And decision makers feel that there is a lack of guidance about how to use evidence about people's values for the marine environment and how to communicate that evidence to policymakers. And finally, a lack of expertise within decision-making organizations for those disciplines that are typically the ones that have the skills to elicit people's values. So these are the social sciences, the arts, and anthropology are just a selection of those disciplines. So these are some of the opportunities and entry points, as I said, that have been both suggested by the decision makers I've been interviewing and also come from reflections within our project team. So on those consultation documents, often these are accompanied by summary documents for particular stakeholders, but there's often a small group of one particular stakeholder or a few stakeholders that are considered to be the ones that will be most impacted by a decision, or perhaps the ones that will cause will have most pushback to a decision. So an entry point could be to broaden the suite of broaden the range of stakeholders that are considered when producing summary documents about consultation documents. A second one would be to make legislative changes, so to actually mandate in legislation about which cultural and social values should be considered in decisions. The establishment of a statutory consultee that would be consulted similarly as other consultees like Historic England and the MMO. And perhaps a separation of socioeconomic assessments into a social assessment and economic assessments that accompany development plans, so that social values are not so strongly tied to economic values. There definitely needs to be a piece of work that empirically debunks these, what we believe to be myths about the cost and time requirements to produce evidence about people's values, and really compare this to the cost and time that it takes to produce other forms of commonly used evidence like environmental data and information. And another piece of work about providing guidance to decision makers about how to use evidence about people's values for the marine and coastal environments and communicate that evidence to policymakers. And finally, we heard from Ed that there are already increasing capacity in these disciplines within decision-making organizations to produce evidence about people's values. So this is already happening. And on my final slide, just to summarize, so today I've just been presenting some initial findings from a piece of work within our diverse values teams project that builds on an evidence review that we are finding these quite obvious gaps in terms of the values that are considered and evidenced in marine decision making, and what decision makers think and have experienced in terms of the barriers and potential entry points to considering a wider suite of values in decision making. And a call to action, I guess, to the people, particularly the many decision makers in this audience, to reflect on some of these barriers that you may be experiencing and the potential entry points that might be possible for your organization to engage with, and also to encourage you to engage with our project. We have several points within today where we're presenting some of the work that we've been doing on producing evidence about people's values for the marine environment. So my colleague Victoria has asked me to highlight that we are showing our video, a CVM film in the break. So that will be an example of one of the pieces of evidence that we're producing from the project. Thank you very much. I'm done.